Hello and welcome. I am DEJI360. The Nigerian Army drone strike incident on Tudumbiri village in Kaduna State, northwest Nigeria now on Sunday, December the 3rd, has been described as one too many. According to the Army, on the night of that fateful day, while the villagers were marking the Maulud celebration to commemorate the birth of Prophet Muhammad, an unnamed aerial vehicle, or unmanned aerial vehicle now I should say, bombed some parts of the community, mistaking the gathering for that of terrorists who were known to operate in that area. According to the Kaduna State Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs, Samuel Aruwan, the troops of the Nigerian Army were on a routine mission against terrorists in the area when the operation accidentally affected members of the community. Now, this is not the first time an incident like this would be happening. In 2021, at least 20 fishermen were accidentally killed in a Nigerian fighter jet strike now on a jihadist camp in northeast Nigeria. Also in January, at least 40 persons were killed by mistaking airstrike from the Nigerian Air Force at Rukubi village of Doma local government area of Nasarawa State. Now, research firm SB Morgan says over 300 persons have been killed since 2017 in accidental strikes by Nigerian forces. The Army has profusely apologized for this latest incident, and it says it has since commenced an investigation on it. President Bola Tinubu has also commiserated with the people and promised a speedy investigation on the matter. Now, TV360 was at the village to speak with some of the victims, and here is the report. It was under this tree that hundreds of the villagers gathered for the Maulud celebrations when the military drone struck. Among those at the spot was the wife of Hashim Abubakar. She was carrying their baby on her back at the time. She was hit and died on the spot.
When I got
to the scene and flashed my torchlight, I saw my wife lying down on the ground with a shattered scalp. My son tied at her back. Noticing he was still alive, I unwrapped him from the back of my dead wife. He is the only surviving son I have. I don't have anything to enjoy. My house has become empty. I'm now left alone with my son. I can never be happy again.
Lydia's 10-year-old daughter was also a victim. She had gone to witness the event and was hit by the strike.
Nothing can ever compensate for the loss of my beloved daughter. The government has dealt us a mortal blow. The government is directly responsible for this. My daughter prepared food for me on that fateful day before she stepped out of the house, saying, "Mommy, I'll be back soon." But she never returned. The army threw bombs at them, and her body was shattered into pieces. There is nothing that I will ask my daughter to do for me that she will not do. But the government joins hands with these evil forces to kill her.
Almost every household in the small community lost loved ones. Their stories tragic and traumatic.
We lost 14 children in our household. We don't have children anymore because of this terrible incident. The Nigerian Army just came and threw bomb at us. I saw when the drone arrived and dropped the bombs. Now we have lost all our children. They left us completely devastated and in deep pain. Even my husband is now hospitalized.
We've lost our children. They told us Mommy will be back shortly, but they never returned. Their clothes are full of blood stains. We need justice in Tudumbiri. We were struggling with other problems in our community. We don't have food to eat. What is the government good for? See human body lying lifeless at farms. Is this normal? It's just pieces of people's bodies that we have picked up from the farms.
I lost 2 of my children in the drone strike on that fateful day. Before now, bandits had killed 1 of my children. Now I'm just left with 1 child. It's not even up to 48 days since I lost my husband.
Tudumbiri is a very poor and neglected community. There's no school or hospital here. Not a single social amenity is present in the community of mainly farmers. The people say they have suffered constant attacks from bandits and that a mistaken drone strike from their own army was the least they ever expected.
This is one incident I can never forget. The memory will remain fresh in my heart. It's shocking that the army will throw bombs at us. All the neighboring villages around us have been deserted because of constant bandit attacks. But our community is the only one holding out. And then, the army came to bomb us. On the 16th of June this year, we suffered terrorist attacks which led to the death of some people. Nothing has been done about it till date. And now, this incident. During that attack, we were very close to the Air Force, but they didn't come to help us. We called on the soldiers, but to no avail. Similarly, during Ramadan, terrorists invaded our community, kidnapped and killed some of our people. We put a call across to the soldiers from 12 a.m., but they didn't reply until 5:30 p.m. when they came around. If the government doesn't want us to live in this community, they should let us know rather than throwing bombs at us.
The Chief of Army Staff and other senior government officials have been here to apologize for the incident and commiserate with the villagers. But some of the grieving women say they are sad no one came to speak to them directly.
Soldiers came, but they only spoke to the men folk and did not talk to women of the community that their children were killed. They should have gone to consult the women in their various compounds. They did not pay any attention to women that were crying because of the number of their children that were killed in the drone strike. Some women had their entire family wiped out, yet no one came to talk to them. That's really wrong.
The villagers say over 80 people were killed in the attack, most of them women and children. All of them are buried in this mass grave. As the villagers say a prayer for their departed loved ones, they say they want an in-depth investigation as to why this incident happened. The military and the government have promised to carry out that investigation, but beyond that, it will sure take a very long time for the people of this poor community to recover from that incident of the night of December 3rd. DEJI360, TV360, Tudumbiri, Kaduna, Northwest Nigeria. Well, joining me now to discuss this issue further is security expert Salahuddin Hashim. Mr. Hashim, thank you very much for joining us on the program. You saw that report, and my first question is, how does the government, should I say, compensate for the losses that these people have suffered? You heard some of them. How does the government deal with this?
All right, thank you very much for having me. I think first of all is to express a very deep dismay and of course completely condemn this accidental strike that has actually resulted into tragic death. The report you have actually just shown is quite heartrending, and I think it is very important that those who are in charge of security decision making need to act very fast in terms of remediating this. That is one. Two, is your intro when you mentioned that this has become a pattern of negligence in counter-insurgency efforts. And then, of course, the disturbing part is the lack of accountability within the similar occurrences in the past. In 2017, we saw how this has happened. We saw this happen in Kaduna in 2022. We saw this happen in January, and this actually suggests some military negligence that has actually resulted into this. Now, directly to your question, in terms of how to respond, I think the Terrorism Prevention Act was very clear in terms of how and what to do in situations like this. One is that the issue of compensations for victims is actually very clear. You must have to provide some immediate and urgent response to manage that incident of making sure that you remediate, you compensate, and then of course you rehabilitate victims like this. And that, for me, is very fundamental. While that is ongoing, government must actually translate this into a query, and that must come from the CAC himself, directing this to the Chief of Army Staff, asking a number of questions. One is to investigate how this has happened. Two is to evaluate the Nigerian Army Aviation Wing. The Army is only a special, they have specialty in ground operations. To have actually deployed an aerial operation and has created this kind of situation is something that we need to now evaluate the Army Aviation Wing and check the capabilities they have and the capacity of personnel to man them. Recall that when this incident happened, the Nigerian Air Force had immediately and instantly distanced themselves from this, and they said, look, 24 hours before or after this incident happened, that they never carried out any operation. So the Nigerian Air Force is mandated, has the mandate for aerial operations. But Army, for some level of political economy, conflict management and counter-insurgency efforts, have actually gone into aerial operation. And then, of course, creating the kind of challenges that is now confronting us directly. And it's very important to carry out an immediate evaluation. And that is something that the president must do directly by ensuring that a translation of queries that would actually help in terms of carrying out that evaluation must happen of that platform. And thirdly, most importantly, is to again check to see that how do we then go forward in terms of the coordination and collaboration between agencies. The president, upon the inauguration of the services, made it very clear that not under his watch would there be any challenge with interagency rivalry, interagency collapse in terms of absence of coordination and collaboration. What we have seen played out very clearly is an agency that specializes in ground operation, mounting an aerial assets.
But very quickly, if I may interject here, we also know that in modern times, the Army also has its own aviation unit, and so this is not out of place. It's nothing new. I mean, we've seen armed forces in other parts of the world having their own, if you like, airborne unit now, and it's that unit that actually conducted the strike. And talking about the Air Force too, that you said, well, should carry out aerial operations like this. We've also seen situations in the past. I mean, some of the incidents you mentioned in Kaduna and in Nasarawa State, for instance, and other places, the Air Force carried out those operations, and the error in the strike led to several deaths as well.
Absolutely. In instances where you have seen Army Aviation operationalizing aerial, it is actually about the capability of your assets, and then, of course, how you have the expertise to man those platforms. Yes, I agree that Army Aviation is an evolving and emerging concept in most developing defense architecture. But again, it's about the maturity of a particular country in ensuring that that happens. The issue to interrogate is that what exactly has led to the aviation wing in the Nigerian Army. And then, of course, because I was part of conversations like this ab initio, was a fact of some collateral damages that had happened in the past, which, of course, couldn't be made public because of a breakdown of communication between the aerial operators and the ground troops that resulted into some fatalities. And then, of course, that in itself warranted or informed the need to have those kind of operations also ongoing. I mean, yes, I agree with you entirely. There is nothing wrong with it. But again, what is wrong with it is to also ensure certification of people who man it. And this is an unmanned aerial vehicle that requires precision. And that precision, you cannot gamble with it. And again, it's about intelligence. Intelligence-led operation has actually been one of the major setbacks that we have also had in recent past. And why is it so? Information isn't intelligence. If you don't act on intelligence within a particular framework or a particular bracket, tendencies are there that you are going to suffer civilian casualty. And that was exactly what happened. Perhaps there was an information.
Sorry, let me quickly ask you this. Do you think this is more like this is more of a failure of intelligence, human intelligence now? Because before that drone strike would have been carried out, I would suppose, you are the security expert here, but I would suppose that there would have been human intelligence from around the community, that a gathering what was taking place, that there was a movement or some. Shouldn't there have been some kind of ground intelligence before an operation of that nature would have been carried out?
Yes, there should have been an intelligence. Intelligence must have happened, but we are actually interrogating the response rates within which that has happened. If the response hasn't been very robust or very effective, opportunities are there that we are going to suffer these kinds of setbacks. So there must have been intelligence, but of course, again, we are interrogating the response capacity towards those intelligence. And that for me was where the issue should be further dwelt and of course interrogated. And again, it's for us to look at the Terrorism Prevention Trust Fund, which was also provided for by the Terrorism Prevention Act 2022, which in itself clearly mentioned the need for some level of remediation in instances like this. And of course, how the Human Rights Commission must also roll in some level of additional investigation into this. In the report you presented, there was something that struck me, and two things. One was when one of the women mentioned that when the conversation came in, that nobody even spoke to the women. And this tells you very clearly the ongoing conversation around gender, peace and security, and the role of women and how they are adversely affected, and what is their participation and inclusion in situations like this. That, for me, is something that also requires additional interrogation. Secondly, is the issue that borders around how people feel. The narrative now was that the military has joined hands with the non-state armed opposition group to carry out this attack, because they have consistently suffered this attack over a period of time. So the military must be deliberate in confidence building to be able to manage situations like this. But to be very honest, I must give it to the Chief of Army Staff, who has, first of all, acknowledged. And that, for me, was a major departure. We don't see this happening in the past because people don't make acknowledgement. And I must commend him for doing that. Strategic communication is at the center of counterterrorism interventions. And he has actually communicated and, of course, visited. And it means that it has shown some level of political interest in the conversation ongoing. And that, for me, is very fundamental. So what exactly should be done going forward is that there must be some level of feedback to also be able to change and counter the narrative going on among civilian populace as to how this kind of fatalities has become a pattern of negligence. That we must deal with. The president has issued some level of sympathy, which is very fine, but there must be a next step. The next step must be how to manage this kind of situation, just to build the civil-military relation infrastructure that we have always amplified for. This is, for me, very fundamental, and there must be a deliberate effort in dealing with that.
And I'm happy you mentioned that soundbite from the woman who said, you know, women were not spoken to. Now, listening to that woman and listening to other women who lost their children in this incident now, and you listen to the way they spoke, you begin to get the impression that it will be difficult to get these people to cooperate in the fight. I mean, to cooperate with the military going forward now in the fight against banditry. Now they see in their minds now the military is like their enemy, and then they have a long-standing enemy they've been dealing with for a very long time. That's the bandits now. So how difficult do you think it will be to turn their minds around and to really see these as a genuine mistake, if you like, an error that was never intended, and then convince them to still continue to cooperate and work with the military to eradicate banditry, especially in their area?
Yeah, I mean, you recall there very clearly that for you to actually have a successful counter-insurgency operation, information from citizens is very fundamental. Their cooperation offer you information that you translate into intelligence. That is so. If that is the case, it means that there must be a deliberate effort to remediate this situation and manage it in a way that will not break down that trust and confidence. And one of the ways to do that is to reach out, to show some level of rebuilding. What are the kinds of rebuilding methodology, infrastructure, or commitment that we have? I saw that the Chief of Army Staff had made some initial promise about what he wants to contribute. That for me isn't sufficient enough. You realize very clearly that these people also in your video mention the absence of governance in that particular locality. Yes. There are no schools, there are no hospitals. These are fundamental. I think it is also an opportunity as part of effort to show remediation. The state government must also provide a primary healthcare center and a school in that particular community as a way of also providing the process of governance to show genuine repentance that, look, this was a very honest mistake. So it will mean that that incident had now become like an attraction of blessings into that particular community. So these kinds of presence of governance would also provide that narrative not to push the civilian populace into a mission of vengeance. Because what we might begin to see is that there are other military operations little going on there, so that they don't begin to sabotage those efforts. So it is very important that that outreach and those deliberate policy that will help to reestablish and rebuild a number of access to public, and you know too well that the absence of governance and ungoverned spaces has always become the breeding ground and a playground for bandits. And that for me is something that would have responded to. Secondly, is to establish a framework for the protection of civilians and civilian harm mitigation in armed conflict. How do we do that? The absence of such framework at national and state level has actually impeded on the rules of engagement deployed in various operational theaters. So there must be some kind of deliberate effort. And one of the framework in the protection of civilians say that you have to appoint in every location where counter-insurgency effort is going on, a community liaison officer who will be able to also support in terms of ensuring that the livelihood and the support and the outreach of the locals are actually being met. And then, of course, provide them with these kinds of joint problem-solving strategy. And then, of course, I mean, you have seen where military in some locations offer medical outreach, offer health outreach, offer some kind of environmental outreach, livelihood, and all of those economic. So what are the kinds of social economic support that can be provided? You have young people there. Are you going to provide them some level of employment? We saw that in the Northeast, people who supported the military, particularly the CJTF, were given employment opportunities into the military. So what are the kind of socio-economic program that you can actually put in place? Yes, apology has been given. Yes, it will be accepted of their time, but you need to heal those people. And the only way to heal them is for them to see a number of prominent young people who also have had a transformed life, giving them a job in the military, in small organizations, for those who are qualified, of course, after going through a vetting process. But of course, prioritize those kind of environment. And again, you have to find how you can, at least in the immediate time, put a pause on that aviation wing until you check. Now, is it because a position problem has occurred, or is it the platform that is actually malfunctioning? Because if the platform is malfunctioning, then there's a need to do a safety check and safety evaluation of all of those platforms. Remember, like we established earlier, that this is a wing other than the Nigerian Air Force. So it is good to do some kind of evaluation of that wing and see that the certification of all of these platforms are up to date and they are correct, fine. We don't have a problem with the Nigerian Army owning its own aviation wing. But of course, again, because lives are going to be involved, there must be an SOP, a standard operating procedure that will allow them to function in a manner that civilian life will not be put in harm's way. And a report from this should come into the public. And finally, for me, would we now be considering having the Nigerian Armed Forces Service Commission, where the issue of effective oversight, interagency disciplinary measures, some level of coordinated policy regime can also happen? This is happening at the THQ level. But again, we are always looking at the issue that borders around how we continue to strengthen democratic oversight. The National Assembly hasn't really been very effective in doing this, which I also expect them to also take some steps in this direction. But I think there is a consideration that should be on the table. We need a commission that will provide immediate oversight on the, I mean, we have the Ministry of Defense, yes, I agree. We have it, but there should be, just like we have the Police Service Commission that also deals with this kind of issue. And I think that perhaps it is time to begin to take this kind of consideration on the table. Because for us, at the end of the day, we want a military that we can own, and then, of course, we can build confidence in. But if this is a pattern, then I am afraid that the people might begin to get afraid and scared once they see any platform moving, because they are not sure what will happen next.
Well, we hope it doesn't become a pattern. Salahuddin Hashim, security expert, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so very much. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back where we'll be speaking to a retired senior Air Force officer on this same issue. Stay with us, don't go away.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places, the Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On DEJI360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians say in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
DEJI360, dissecting the issues.